I'm Technical Sergeant Troy Nixon. I'm the secretary of the 5-6. I'm also part of the 330th Special Warfare Recruiting Squadron. So I just want to welcome everyone for being on this call. This is being recorded live on Facebook, and it's something that we'll share after the fact once we're done as well. So yeah, again, thank you to leadership. Thank you to everyone who's on the call. So this call is primarily geared towards, our hosts having basically a conversation with our guest speakers. You're more than welcome to post any type of questions you may have for the host or the guest speakers. We'll pretty much gather those and ask them at the end of this talk. We are going to have more times where we keep this discussion going, because we know this isn't the type of thing where we just want to check off a box and be one and done. But at least what we wanted to do today is bring a different perspective to the table, because typically we all get on as military folks and we bring out different backgrounds, but at the end of the day, we're all in the military. So, and nothing's wrong with that, but we just wanted to bring in a different perspective today. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our host, Technical Sergeant Taylor from the 364th RCS. And sir, I just want to thank you again for doing this while you're on leave. That is dedication. So appreciate you. I'll turn it over.
Awesome. Hey, appreciate it there too, sir. Hey, so like you said, my name is Technical Sergeant Lorenzo Taylor. I'll be your host for today, and we're going to be talking to three outstanding speakers. Just to give you guys a little bit of information about myself, I've been in the Air Force for 13 years. I came in as a 3D1H3, a radio frequency transmission guy. Been around the world probably 3 different times.
That's what I'm doing.
Got to experience so much in my career. Let's see here. So we're just going to get right into our guest speakers. And talk a little bit about each one of them, and then we're going to start off with our number one. Okay. So Dr. Elam, she is a nationally recognized authority in diversity and culturally competency, research and training for education, business, governmental, and community agencies. And our second guest speaker is Captain Dennis C. Early III, pretty outstanding name there. He serves as a diversity and inclusive task force lead from the 14th Flying Training Wing and as a group practice manager assigned to the 14th Medical Group at Columbus Air Force Base, Mississippi. Then lastly, we have Staff Sergeant Malcolm Bentley. He is from the 14th Flying Training Wing on Columbus Air Force Base, Mississippi, as well as a member of the Diversity and Inclusive Task Force, and serves as the NCRC of Equal Opportunity Office. All right. So without further ado, we're going to start off with Dr. Elam. She's going to introduce herself and briefly share her background information from, and then we'll talk about.
Thank you so much. And thank all of you for the work that you do. You're the backbone of why we can stand free. So we thank you for that. My background's in education. And originally, I really wanted to go into law, and then went into education by choice, but then I found myself going more into civil rights work. So early in my career, I started at New York University at a desegregation center, and it was quite interesting because people say, well, we did desegregation already. And so the work was tying the law to education. If we saw any disparities, if we saw disproportionality, if we saw a trend of something happening that didn't fit the general population of the school district. So that's where my interest was in my dissertation. I studied desegregation in Buffalo, and my life's work has been in that direction. I'm about to finish next month as a state commissioner for human relations for the state of Florida. And I sit on it started right after 9/11. We had a task force that I think the governor's appointed us to have a work group against hate crimes. After 9/11, about 2 years ago, the group morphed into a civil rights task force. And so we work together with law enforcement, Department of Justice, Office of Civil Rights, education, and different state agencies to bring about how do we impact communities when we go through some trauma, some events. like the shooting in Orlando at the club. We were all called in to talk about how do we heal a community after that, because the Muslim and the LGBTQ community was directly impacted way after the shooting. It was horrible enough with the deaths, but the community suffered after that. So we come together and talk about how do we heal a community. After the Parkland shooting in Fort Lauderdale, we were brought together with the Department of Justice again and to talk about what do we do differently in schools for security and protection and making a safe place for students. So that brought me into doing some diversity work with law enforcement because I know Florida has, I don't know if the other states have it, but we have a first responders group now called Guardians in our schools after the Parkland shooting. And it's 132 hours of training. They have to be former military, former law enforcement in order to apply for these positions, but they're first responders and in our schools in Florida. So out of the 132 hours, that was with the sheriff's department. 12 hours or 2 days was set aside just to talk about diversity and equity. What does that mean? How do you build relationships in a community where it might be polarized? Um, and then, so the work that I do now, and it's very, very busy because teachers are basically afraid of, even though some of the schools are opening up this week, on how to begin those conversations on race. We know that it's going to trickle into the schools. So if we plan properly, we should be able to really guide children in their thinking. We don't know how much trauma children have gone through. It's been, what, 5 months since they've seen teachers in person. So we're doing a lot of social emotional learning integrated into the academic piece as we re-enter the schools. So it's just kind of a gist of my background.
Awesome. So we have a couple questions for you, seeing if you can answer them for us.
Okay.
The number one would be, can you explain to us what implicit bias is?
Yes. So when people hear the term bias, immediately it you see a lot of resistance. It's because we don't want to be considered biased. But in biases, implicit bias, we all have it. And it's pervasive in everything we do. And it's not necessarily good or bad. It's how we filter life based on our experiences. And that's when I start talking about implicit bias for people to understand, not going into the denial, I don't see color and that kind of conversation. Because we do. We see gender, we see color, we see people. And so it's what do we do with how we interact with people is the important part. So we know that implicit bias is pervasive in all that we do. And we all have biases. No matter how much we work on it, we all have it. But an implicit biases are, it's like the automatic reaction that the brain has in that construct on the experiences that we have on how we view certain things and certain people. Okay. So what I think surprises people is that an implicit bias could come out that really doesn't reflect what we really believe or our declared belief. Let me see if I can give an example. As a woman of color, I am not biased against men of color, but what if I'm in a car and I'm in a community where I may feel a little uneasy and I automatically lock my doors? What is that? That's a bias, but see what I'm saying? So do you automatically lock your door, or the elevator comes and you push the button because you don't want anybody else in because you may have a bias toward what may happen? Those kinds of things are automatic. It doesn't necessarily declare your belief. And some people struggle with that piece. Let's see. We usually have an implicit bias toward our own in-group. So we usually prefer the people that are within our own circle. And it makes sense. Those are the people that we have relationships with. We understand their cultural background. We share the same experiences. And that's why with diversity and equity work, in order to address bias, we have to really get to know and build relationships with people to understand their beliefs, their cultural backgrounds, the norms for them, for an understanding. Doesn't mean that we necessarily have to agree with any other group. It's understanding and that they have the right to live their lives as free as they choose. Doesn't change, doesn't impact us in a negative way. The bottleneck for the work that I do, the bottleneck is trying, if we feel superior about our background, our culture, and that everything else is less than. And it comes out in our language, how we interact with people, or literally sometimes just trying to, as we say, save people because we think what we have is better. And that's where the bottleneck comes in with our schools. I could give you an example in a school. One of my teachers working in a high school, it was an open session with a high school student. The high school student happened to have been Muslim. And so the parents were coming in, but she knew that this was an older gentleman, but it was an arranged marriage. Now the teacher was like feeling a little uncomfortable because the young lady was, I think, 13 and it was an older person coming as the custodial parent, but was really the husband. The meeting was, the purpose of it was to talk about academics. It was talking about the child's career in a high school. So you have to keep the focus on what the purpose of the event was. And so, because she went through diversity training, equity, she was very respectful in the interaction because that was their culture, that was their tradition. Even though she may have felt differently about it. You see what I'm talking about? So it can hit your beliefs, your attitudes, but it's how we handle those biases that we have as we interact with people. What's another piece that I wanted to emphasize? Biases can be altered, and we can do some proactive things to reframe how we interact with people, our understanding of people's culture and norms. When you read my bio, you were talking about cultural competence. My research is in cultural competence leadership, and cultural competence didn't come from education, it came from the health field. Because if I knew more about the people I'm interacting with, that I'm working with, I can be more effective in the way I communicate because we have a mutual understanding. We can communicate. We can understand. And it was very important in the health fields because as doctors were treating their patients coming in, if I understood what you believed in, your practices, what you ate, did you come to the doctor first as proactive measure, or did your family first pray it through before you came? It tells you, it helps guide how I'm going to be very effective in working with you as my patient. So the cultural competence, the concept came out of the health fields, and we've kind of borrowed it and we're bringing it into education to see how can we make those competencies work in education. You can stop me and keep asking. You want me to keep going through? Okay.
Yes, that was an outstanding answer. I have another one for you as well. The question is, in your experience, what have been the most difficult barriers to overcome with organizations you trained, and how did you help them progress?
Excellent question. And we're in a place right now in our country that all of us are part of real history, and I think a significant time to understand diversity and equity in a different way, and inclusion. What I find the most difficult is when we don't acknowledge that inequities and disparities exist. When we dismiss them, that's not important. I use it, and I hope you don't mind if I'm using examples because I think you make different connections when I do that.
No.
I was sharing a video with a group of educators. And I don't know if any of you remember hearing about the Black Doll study. If you have your screen up, can I see a show of hand or something? The Black Doll study was during the civil rights. Oh, okay, good. I see. Thank you. Um, was during the civil rights and period. And what happened when we gave children a range of dolls, they always went to the white doll because they thought that that was a better doll and smarter doll, all those kind of things. And that was in the 60s. So years later, you know, we've had all kinds of versions of looking at the black doll test. That's what they call it. And when there's another activity that we have the same little cutout doll, but it just has shades from white to a dark brown. And we still ask children. I think Anderson Cooper was one of people moderating this session. They had researchers ask the children, we're talking about elementary school children, who is the teacher's favorite and who is the smart child and who is a child that you want to have friends with. And the majority of children still were choosing lighter skin and rejected darker skin. Okay. So if we know that that's part of systemic racism because children are hearing that, we said, how do children learn who's valued and who's not valued? You know, and they start to find that out about 3 years old. And so after showing the video, and we use it for a discussion piece, one of the administrators came and said, what on earth could have possibly happened to that child to feel that her color wasn't appealing or that she didn't want to be that brown? And that's when I knew that the experiences were so different that it wasn't the one thing that happened, it's the pervasiveness of her constantly hearing that brown or black is less than. And that no one may have said that directly to her, but she's picking it up from the commercials, what's called, and those kinds of things. So acknowledging that we have systemic racism is important. And systemic racism, we know, exists across every single institution that we have in society. And once we get, it's hard for educators. I'm just getting to a place, and I've done this most of my career working on diversity, that we're getting educators to look at the data and go, wow, what can I do differently? Because I think what happens, people become sensitive and resist because they think we're calling them racist or sexist or whatever that ism is. And that's not what the case is. It's how do we look at our data and say, what can we do differently to remedy the disparities or the disproportionalities that we see in our data? So getting our educators to recognize it. And we were discussing earlier, I'm working on a book on equity. And one of my colleagues, who happens to be white female, was all excited. She's doing some research for me. And she shared with one of her friends who's a teacher and said, oh, we're working on an equity book. And the teacher's response was, oh, here we go again. And that's dismissing that we know that we have existing disparities and inequities in our country. We know that across, you know, all of these institutions. So once we acknowledge that it exists, that's the greatest challenge. Then we can start talking about the remedies and solutions for it. Does that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So I have a two-part question for you, if you don't mind.
Sure. Not at all.
Okay. What specific challenges have you dealt with within the school districts? And are there any organizations within the school systems that recruiters should build key relationships with the efforts of establishing that diverse connection and understanding?
Okay. In the school district, when any recruiters come in, who do you work with mostly? Your counselors or the principals?
Mostly counselors and students.
And the students directly. you rarely probably see the principals other than when you first come to establish the relationship.
Right.
Okay. Because children have a certain perception, and families, just not children, but families have a certain perception of law enforcement, military, and it will be based on experiences that their families have. Because I'm not sure if I see a lot of um, material in the schools for kids to really understand the opportunities like that the Air Force has. And I think having sessions and working with the principals, with the councils, of course, but having it more of an executive group to say, how can we better inform our students that these are great options? And then I would have the benefits in a one page. You know how we deal with politicians, you have a one pager with the facts.
Right.
I would have the benefits really on a one pager that you share with families. Because even just going into the fire department, so many kids have no idea the benefits of going to the fire department, police department. If they don't have a family member that's there, they really know the whole picture. So I think having fact sheets on that, I would work with more than a counselor, unless there's something that binds you to just working with the counselor. I would ask to see if you can have, at least in the beginning of the year, to have a meeting with your principal, maybe the leadership team and the counselor. Now we have different levels. We have trust counselors, we have academic counselors, we have behaviorists, um, we have coaches. I think coaches would be another group there because they have a different kind of relationship with students. To have one initial meeting at the beginning of the year as you're building relationship, maybe in that school, so that you can share, you know, this information. I know when one of my nieces graduated and her friend went into the Air Force, her father was like up in ranks, and and she ended up with a full ride. It was so impressive the opportunity that she was going to have. And I don't think our kids are exposed to understanding the benefits that way. They they may not, well, they're not exposed to it. So I think more facts about the benefits, especially supporting education, the careers, seeing the world, all of those kinds of things. Even though you may have commercials and things like that, talking to our kids, if they're not familiar or exposed, they're really not going to know that. It's like word of mouth unless they meet you directly. But I think sharing with them the benefits, because that happens even in the programs that we have in schools. They don't know the advanced classes like AP or dual enrollment. Many of our minority kids and poor kids don't understand the benefits of that. And no one is talking to them. They just assume, I guess, that they'll figure it out. But the more we guide them and give them the information for them to make the decisions, I think the better it would be. So you asked about the acknowledging racism. Did I answer both your questions? Because you said it was twofold. Oh, I know it's another piece. For when you go into any career or college opportunity, if you have disproportionate numbers represented, like women in certain careers or Black or Hispanic in certain careers, our children, more often than not, and this is the research that I'm working with teachers, are often into a fixed mindset, which means they're kind of stuck thinking their self-esteem may not be in place just because of exposure. It's not that's the way they were born. They just don't have the opportunity to grow, especially if they're in poverty as well. So moving them from a fixed mindset that you hear them, I can't, I don't know, you know, they give up very easily. I do strategies with teachers to move them from that fixed mindset into a growth mindset of saying, I can do anything. That would be a great opportunity. I could be the first one in my family to be in the Air Force. Do you see what I'm saying? But you have to very intentionally move them into that direction, especially if children are not exposed to, you know, opportunities that all of you have.
Okay,
And the
okay.
women in particular, because they don't see women in military that often. So you want to cause cognizant dissonance. You want to shake up their thinking about what could be. And I think you have opportunity to do that.
Thank you. I appreciate that answer.
Mhm.
Got another question for you. This is more so directed towards personnel in the Air Force. What steps can our NCOs and airmen take to become more educated on implicit bias and to overcome the issues?
Well, Harvard, everyone now, especially since the quarantine, we're all talking about the disproportionality of and systemic racism. If this group, because I don't just blankly tell people to take this implicit bias test, but Harvard has created, I don't know if maybe some of you have taken it. It's just a self-assessment, self-reflection. It's called Project Implicit. You just Google it, you'll see Harvard implicit bias. And it's a free assessment and it gives you feedback. It's real quick, it's maybe about 20 minutes. You answer and you can choose it on gender, you can choose it on race, ethnicity, I think ability. I think they may have LGBTQ in it now. And it gives you a sense of who your preference group is. I would begin with something like a self assessment because it doesn't go to anyone, it's just for you. And what you do, you tend to be skewed toward your in group, but not necessarily. So about 3% of the population comes off in a neutral, that it's rare. I I knew that I was going to be skewed. It didn't surprise me, but we all are. And it kind of lets people understand that we all have biases. That's where it starts. But then what do you do how do you use that knowledge to interact with people? You work on yourself. So how do you work on yourself? You documentaries. And we've been spending more time in quarantine. Colleagues around the country will say there's a like the 13th. I think I had listed some of them. 13th was a great movie, went into some of the civil rights pieces, Just Mercy, movies like that, that you come back and you talk about, I didn't know that those kinds of things existed. Because I do civil rights work and I'm always trying to show, I've taken, what is that? Oh, Time to Kill. You remember seeing that movie years ago? I've used excerpts from that, the summation of the lawyer. And he talks about it was a rape it wasn't a murder, but it was a rape of a young girl. And she was African American, but he describes it. And at the end, he says, what if she was white? And it shakes people up because it's so automatic with implicit bias. We go into an automatic construct of who we see. And when he says, what if she was white? And everybody's shaken by it because they knew that they thought a little differently about this child. So using documentaries, movies, and be very purposeful and intentional on the purpose of it. What's the purpose of looking at it? It's to unpack and understand the experiences of others so that it's not dismissed, it's real. And earlier today, before we had everyone in on the Zoom session, we were talking about it. For many people of color, even talking about racism can get you anxious. Everyone else would say, oh, we're going to watch, and they would watch a movie. Sometimes it's hard for us because it's what you live every day. It's how you go out into the world and pick and choose what you talk about, or if you allow something to just be dismissed because you don't want to have arguments all the time. But it's very stressful being, women go through it, I'm sure. Men, if you're in a situation where it's predominantly females, Black men in particular, a lot of heaviness goes on what I choose to respond to and what I don't, because it is pervasive. It's all day long, and you just pick and choose the things that you want to address if it's just too much. But that's part of the whole systemic racism piece, is that it exists and we know it. It's not to be dismissed, but how do we remedy it as human beings and citizens of the world even? How do we remedy those kind of things? I don't know if I hope that's helpful. The other piece is always having a safe place to really talk. we have a lot of diversity work. I've been doing diversity work for over 30 years. And some of it is like I never even had a conversation. You know, you walk out, you come back, you don't see residuals. You want to see residuals. How do you measure when you're there? And so establishing that, I use a logic model. I always look at the impact that I want to have. What is the long-term impact? What resources are we going to use? Like this association would be a resource, right? I talk because I'm always talking about my slides, right? So you see me talking with my hands a lot. So you look at what activities and strategies will you use to have the output and the outcome that you want. And then you measure it. When do you know that you arrived unless you measure the difference? You know, when you see a difference in the data that's most important to your organization. And so those are the kinds of things that I would advise you to do. But having a safe place to actually have those kinds of conversations. We don't know what other people experience until we have those trusted, authentic conversations.
What is your example of safe places though?
A safe place is setting the tone that everyone has a voice. You don't have to. A safe place could be this group. A safe place is the optimal conditions to have real conversations about diversity and equity. We really haven't. Um, we've had surface level conversations, but I think we're at that place now. And I wanted to send in, you know, for the group, some of the new language that we hear talking about with anti-racism work. You probably hear like ally, white privilege, white fragility, um, anti-racist work, anti-bias work. I have a glossary that I've created so people just understand the terms. Some of them can feel very charged, you know, so that people understand exactly what they are. And so I can send that to you, Sarge. You know, it's just good information. And I think the more, it's very important to understand the terms, because with diversity work, we'll interpret it to mean from our experience. So defining terms is important. So let me write that. I'll get that to you because I think that's important. That's a good step. Having optimal conditions, and that's basically what you already stand for, is to be respectful, that there are multiple perspectives on everything. You know, just because it doesn't impact you that way doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And to hear what your colleagues are going through, and then collectively have suggestions and remedies and solutions on how to address it. Make
Okay.
sense?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
All right.
So, second to last question, is it, do you think it's possible to change a person's stereotypical misconceptions? And if so, what would you suggest?
Relationships do it. You know, we really tout the military for the work that you do in diversity, because you're way beyond the rest of the institutions, education, and, you know, the workplace. I think you have a lot going for you already because your foundation is about respect. I think if we really push the agenda of the authentic conversations, because we see it in military, um, you know, like you're the chosen ones that you when we go to recruit. And Mississippi, by the way, I do a lot of work in Mississippi. Meant to mention that. When we do a lot of recruiting and we have people going for a second career, if it's military, we want to jump because we know the kind of character that people have that have gone through the military, the discipline and those kinds of things. So you want to use all those strengths that you have already with the military. But when you're talking about becoming an ally is a person who is not from that group, but does the same heavy lift to help remedy the solution of prejudice and bias. And one of the things that this association can do is really develop an ally in an authentic way. And that ally, I have the description of it, but that's what I'm hearing differently now than I've heard in the past in some of the civil rights work. We also have a new level of consciousness and awareness that the country can hear differently It's less resistance than we've seen in the past. We've seen that. And as you're going for recruitment, just for you to know, you may know this already, millennials are already, based on the research, we're already seeing that they have a high value placed upon social justice. So you have a very workable group that's coming into the military as well. So we're seeing that, and you see that as a result of some of the demonstrations that are happening, that you see that is very diverse than in the past, where the one group who was fighting for their rights would be the only ones there, or, you know, not the only ones, but in the majority. Now it's very broad, and we're seeing that already. So take advantage of the fact that you have like self-made allies already. But to be an ally is you want to lift the situation alongside the people who are oppressed or impacted. And that's what my recommendation would be. But read, yes, and then just look at the documentaries. We just lost a major icon, John Lewis and C.T. Vivian. Look at their lives. Look at what they stood for. But it wasn't until and my dissertation is in desegregation, and I did not know until I spent time with them, listening to the stories and looking at documentaries, that the civil rights movement in the 60s was not a political movement. It was always a spiritual movement. And that's why it hit the heart and soul of America, because they wanted to make it better for their children. They knew that they had to remedy the injustices. And every person, when I was writing the children's book, every single one of the Courageous Eight, C.T. Vivian, uh, everyone who came through said they never mentioned politics in it. They always talked about this was a spiritual movement to make life better for the whole. And that's what, when I think when we're talking about being authentic, and I think that's what you stand for. Your branch, as you know, from the Air Force, you stand for making things better. And how do we, if we make things better, that means we make things better for everyone. It's just not one group. And to have that kind of conversation.
Well,
I
that
hope
is go.
it's
That is
helpful.
the go.
Okay.
So our last question that we have for you, how would you suggest tactically having an ongoing discussion about race, diversity, and inclusion?
I think if you have a purpose for each one of your sessions, so that people feel that it's just not time to either gripe or um, not have an end in mind. So I think if you have a purpose, if the purpose is to develop a deeper understanding of each other based on culture and experience, then you want that. You want a very intentional direction and an outcome. Um, so doing those kinds of things. I think, and I may be biased on this, but having your females talk about their experiences in a way that you go, wow, I don't even have to worry about that as a male. You know, people speaking different languages. The more we learn about each other, and I'm talking about just not, what we like, but those solid relationships, the more we're exposed to people's, um, their journeys, the more open we are to be more accepting. People use the word tolerance and it gets them triggered. The word tolerance by itself, without bringing the heaviness to it, really means accepting one another. I think people don't like to use the term, but the more we don't have to agree with the lifestyle or some of the beliefs. We just have to allow people to live their life freely. So the more that we develop those real authentic relationships, I think that would be the direction to do. And really develop allies across the different groups for people to understand. It'll impact us with our families as we're raising our families, the kind of relationships we do. The research that we have in school districts, we know that if we have diverse student populations in the school, it increases critical thinking, it increases civic responsibility. We know this. This is part of the research. When we have diverse schools, children choose careers and colleges. They look for those kinds of things. They're less biased because they've been exposed to people from different walks of life. So we know that it has that impact in the long run. If it has that impact on children, just imagine what it can have, in the Air Force. So I really am going to end on that one because I know we have other speakers.
Yes, and before transitioning to our next speakers, I just want to thank you for definitely being on this and speaking to us. It was definitely eye-opening, and we learned such amount of information from you. But is there anything that you want to provide to the crowd before we move forward?
I would identify some new best practices as this group convenes and you continue those periodic sessions. I would really start crafting the new best practices because it might be what we've said in the past, but I think you are pioneering on new territory. So I would add that. Maybe have exit slips that you use as you finish a session to see what people gain from it, what they choose to implement as a result of any of your sessions, so that you can start collecting your data. That's what I would suggest. But thank
Awesome.
you. It's an honor for me to be interacting with you, and thanks, Saj.
Awesome. And then where can we find your books at again that you have?
Oh, why they marks? I'll send something to you because they just came out with it. So they just sent me the flyer. So I know some people have gotten it on Amazon, but if it's a blue cover, it's the new one from 2020. If it's the red cover, it's the one that I wrote originally. And then the Equity of Effort, that's the new one that I'm writing. That should be coming out in the next couple of months. But I'll stay in touch with you.
All right. Well, thank you, ma'am, and everyone that is Elam, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. Really proud of the work, and having this conversation says a lot about who you are, your character, and who you are as individuals, not only from the Air Force, but in humanity. It says a lot about who you are. So thank you for being you.
Yeah. All right. So next we have Captain Dennis C. Early III. Sir, are you there? Captain Early. Also looking for Staff Sergeant Malcolm Bentley. Are you guys there? I don't know if you guys, this mic is mute.
Can you hear me? Hello? Shouldn't be muted. Hello?
I can hear you, Cap.
Okay. Can everybody else hear us? Okay. What is going on? Sergeant Taylor muted, so. I think you guys, Sergeant Taylor, I think you muted yourself. I can't hear you.
Okay, yeah. Can you hear me now?
There we go. Okay.
Hey, it's a new world, right? Technology. So yes, I was just trying to reintroduce you two, Captain Dennis C. Early III, and then we have Staff Sergeant Malcolm Bentley. You guys, both of you all in the room. Captain, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit more, and then we'll go into Q&A.
Yes, of course. So I'm Captain Dennis Early. I've been in the Air Force for 14 years as of next week. I started off as a 3D1X1 client systems technician back when I was enlisted for about 6 years. And then I commissioned in 2012. And now I'm a medical service corps officer, AKA healthcare administrator. I was born in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And the reason why I joined the D&I team, and I guess I'll pause right there and say, so another thing that I do is I lead the Diversity and Inclusion Task Force for Columbus Air Force Base. A couple months ago, when everything was going down, a tasker came down when I was the group exec, and it was looking for a point of contact. And I immediately stepped out of my office and went right to my group commander and said, hey, I want to be a part of this team, and I don't want to just be a part of it, I want to lead it. Because I'm passionate about our people, and I'm passionate about what's going on outside those gates to make sure that that does not continue on, as well as it does not continue to impact our airmen inside those gates. So that's why I'm leading the efforts here, and I can tell you guys a little bit more about that. But I'll pause there and toss it over to Sergeant Bentley so he can tell you guys about himself.
I'm Sergeant Malcolm Bentley. I am a equal opportunity specialist by trade. My previous career field is security forces. I've been in the Air Force for 8 years now, and originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So that's pretty much me in a nutshell. And I'm also a part of the diversity and inclusion team. And the reason why I'm a part of the team is because just provide a subject matter expertise when it comes to our climate on the base. I have a lot of data when it comes to how our climate is being ran through different reports that we run, the deoxys. So and a lot of just self-awareness out and abouts. So I just provide that to the Diversity and Inclusion Task Force.
Awesome. Awesome. Captain, was there anything else you wanted to include, or would you like to press forward?
Let's press forward. I try to be a man of few words.
All right. So for you, Captain, what reference material can we share with applicants, influencers to assure them that we have zero tolerance for racism and discrimination of any type?
So Sergeant Bentley is a lot more knowledgeable in this subject, so I'm gonna pass that over to him.
Okay.
So before I begin, I just want to truly thank you, ma'am, for just being an example and the knowledge, the wealth of knowledge that you have. You most definitely just touched my life just with the time that I spent with you. And I've actually experienced the DAW, I guess, case study with my own daughter. And that is something that I'm really trying to work through now. So I will most definitely let the keep in contact. You know, I don't want to take up too much time, but I just want to make sure I thank you just for what you do and truly for impacting my life. But going back to the references material, I will be sending out to Sergeant Nixon a trifold that I developed. It just had the bases on there because a lot of people don't know Title VII and what protected categories that you have. So when it comes to race, color, sex, national origin, sexual orientation, for civilians, you have religion, age, disability, reprisal, and there's different categories for military and civilians. The reason why I try to teach both categories is because we work in a force of civilian and military as a joint force. So, but I will be sending some of that information out into where also some hyperlinks when it comes to the Equal Opportunity Office Commission, where you can file a complaint, or you can, you also have regional equal opportunity partitioners for different regions. And I will also have that information out for, so like for the West Regional and the East Regional, I will have their contact information if you all needed it, or the close bases where if you did want to go into a close office, you would just have that information available. But also some zero tolerant policies. Each base pushes out their own EO policy. So for our base, we have Colonel Graham. He is drafting up his EO policy as we speak. And that's basically just pushing out a push, hey, this is a zero tolerance policy at this installation. If you do, you're going against these violations. So those are some of the reference materials that we have, and I will be sending out just for the knowledge, and you can pass it to whoever needs it.
Awesome, thank you, sir. For Captain Early, how can a victim of racism, discrimination, or bias seek help? And then there's another part of the question. Have you ever noticed if your base is moving in a more unified direction when it comes to fighting for equality?
So, I will attack the second question first. So for our base, as Sergeant Bentley mentioned, our commander, Colonel Graham, as soon as this came down, this was the first thing that he wanted to address with his team, his leaders, and with our airmen. And he sent out an email and told everybody where he stood and his zero tolerance with when it comes to racism, as well as how he's an advocate for moving forward to make sure that we eliminate those systematic as well as conscious, unconscious biases that exist in our Air Force. And so for us, what we've been really looking at across our installation is, one, identifying what's going on. Like where are our gaps? where are those issues that are affecting the airmen of Columbus Air Force Base. And just to give you guys a snapshot, Columbus is northeast Mississippi, about probably 5 to 10 minutes from the Alabama border. We're a very small base. Our focus is on creating new pilots. We only have roughly about 15 to 1,700 active duty. However, even though we are small, we have big impact. And of those 1,700 active duty, roughly about 8 to 1,000 of them are about pilots. And then there's roughly around 500 to 600 that are support personnel. And that's where the majority of our young airmen are that support that pilot community. However, saying that, those pilots, those are initial pilots. Those are student pilots. Those are our future Air Force leaders. So if we can get it right here, then we are truly impacting change across the Air Force for the future. And so saying that, I want to make sure I'm answering your question appropriately. What we've done is we've actually created a 12-month plan to try to identify those gaps that I mentioned earlier, as well as different mitigation methods. And the first thing that we've been doing is our wing commander, he actually had a meeting and a panel called Let's Talk Columbus about a week or so ago. And he sat down with our community leaders and they talked about what is going on in the community, as well as what our wing plans on doing to mitigate these issues. And that was huge because as you guys know, we are in Mississippi. And Mississippi definitely has a deep history when it comes to being Black in America. And that is deep rooted. That is not something that can change tomorrow. However, it showed that our community is ready to start pushing this change, and that they all want to work together, and our Air Force Base and our leaders also want to partner to make sure that we can make that change moving forward. And so I'll talk about some of our items a little bit later, what we plan on doing, but to let you definitely know that our leadership team here, it is one of the hot topics. We're having conversations daily just to make sure that, hey, whatever is going on, that we are out front and we are making sure that we are on the right front moving forward. But I'll pause that part and throw the other question over to Sergeant Bentley so that he can ask, how can a victim of racism or discrimination or bias seek help?
So with me, I'm gonna again send out those information when it comes to people that you can contact. And once you get to that point, you have two options. It can be done in an informal or formal route. With the informal route is basically handling concerns or issues at the lowest level. You can bring in a mediator. We, as EO partitioners, we also offer the skill of being a mediator, where we can bring individual and the alleged offender to the table to just facilitate a conversation. One thing that I have found in my experience is some of these things come from your socialization, as we were talking about, and miscommunication. Some words and terminologies aren't used in neighborhoods as it was for you coming up. So just trying to understand the root of the concern. Sometimes that mediation can solve the issue, and sometimes it can't. So we also offer the formal route. And in the formal route, the EO partitioner will go in to clarify the individual's allegations. We are not investigators. A lot of people feel that EO partitioners are investigators. We're not OSI or security forces. We are just individuals here to clarify your allegations from reports and interviews. We bring witnesses to the table, ask them some clarifying questions. Once we get all that information and data, we consolidate it and say, on the preponderance of evidence, this allegation has happened or has not happened. So that is the process in a nutshell when it comes to if someone has feel like they've been discriminated against or harassed.
And I'll also throw this out there because I wanted to make sure that Sergeant Bentley provided you guys the more formal answer, right? And so I'll throw another side to that coin to say that, hey, when you feel like you're going through these things, especially those certain biases that maybe you know it in your heart, it is what it is, but you can't prove it, I would say talk to a mentor. Get advice from someone that's not going to tell you what you want to hear. because that's that part of getting a diverse group of thought and perspectives. Because maybe this is our background and maybe we know it is what it is, but when you can get someone external that you trust can give you candid feedback and will tell you the truth, then that also can help provide you either comfort and or direction on where you need to go next. Because the worst thing that you could do is feel like you are 100% right in this, and then you found out that you were wrong. You know, now you have potentially ruined someone's reputation, you know, as well as a potential relationship, that because you felt like, based off your perspective and your experiences, that this person was discriminating or prejudiced against you for X and Y reason based off your current demographics.
And again, one more thing, that's why we always stress to the individual, have you had the conversation? Because a lot of people don't know that they discriminated against you, going back to the unconscious bias that we have, because again, it's just second nature to them. If they feel like they're just acting how they always act, not knowing that it affected you in a negative way, they will never know unless you have that conversation with them. And if you don't feel comfortable, again, going to a mentor, hey, do you feel comfortable sitting down with me and this individual to have this conversation, just so we can grow from it?
Okay, well, speaking on that, Sergeant Bentley, you guys may have already touched bases on this question. I just want to make sure it's pretty clear. But how would you suggest having a conversation with a coworker who has made inappropriate comments towards you or others?
One of the ways that I found is most helpful is having a third party mediator there, because sometimes a lot of people don't like confrontation. Some people feel like when you come to them with an issue that you're attacking their character, and it can just be a miscommunication. So having a person there, a neutral party, not for or against, just, hey, I'm just here to try to make sure you have a chance to get off what you want to off your chest, and the other individual will have a chance to articulate what they meant by that word or action, and say, hey, well then, do you mind not doing that to me, because it triggered some things in my past where I feel like it really affected me. Oh yes, I won't do that again. And then of course, if it doesn't go that easy, we have other routes, which I will be again providing that information to you on ways that you can go about it to make sure these things are handled. Because again, we don't want things in the Air Force and then outside of the Air Force to just stop if things aren't resolved. Just because you had that conversation, it's like, okay, yeah, that person didn't get it, then I guess I don't have anything to do. No, you have different avenues and different routes that you can take to make sure we are stopping racism, sexism, sexual harassment as much as possible.
And I will add to that as well, to say, first of all, like, so when these things happen, you know, what usually happens? We're angry, we're mad. You know, we want to, especially being African American. Oh yeah, I'm going to address it. You know, but sometimes we also need to pause and say, will the conversation, if I continue with my current emotional state, will it be constructive or destructive? And so that's where I say that, hey, when you run into these situations, maybe it's best to pause, step back, and say, I'm going to address this later when I'm in a better state of mind. Because that's the worst thing that we can do, is we just go off the hinges, and what happens? As soon as our emotions are high, the other person's not listening, and you're not going to get the outcome that you want. And so that's one of the best advices that I could tell people. And one person that I wish I would have met, but I'm not. There's no way I could have, not at my age. But I read a book on Lincoln on leadership, and it was Abraham Lincoln, that whenever he was angry or frustrated, he would write a letter to the individual, but he would never send it. And so he left his emotions on that letter. And there were so many letters that were not sent by Abraham Lincoln where his feelings was on that paper. And so that's the same thing that I say, is that we should pause and take the time away, go vent to someone. And then when you're ready, then sit down and have that conversation with that person. Because I promise you, you'll feel a lot better, because what happens every time we get angry and we talk to somebody, we always regret it later. But at least at this time, you know, you're in a better state of mind, and the person could hopefully be able to listen, you know, and then you could come out to a more common ground at the end of where they can understand where you were coming from, and they could probably see that what they did or what they had said was most likely in the wrong.
Awesome. That is some very good viewpoints right there. I appreciate that. So we have another question for you, sir. What initiatives are you working on at your base and within your local community in regards to race and diversity and inclusion?
So, woo, man, you guys got me hyped over here. Oh, shoot. So I'll tell you, as I spoke earlier, so we have a 12-month plan, and mind you, it doesn't end at 12 months, but we had to cap it somewhere, as we continue to make sure that we are pushing forward, you know, for change here at Columbus. And so for me, so we are Team Blaze. So I titled this Blazing a Way for Change across Columbus Air Force Base. And so, as I mentioned earlier, so there was a panel that started off with our local community members. And so what we have coming forward is at the end of this month, we're actually going to have a Ruck Against Racism. This is an event that is led by our First Sergeants Council, and we're going to have our diversity and inclusion team members there to speak about, you know, what diversity and inclusion is, you know, just have those conversations with the members there, you know, just to continue to keep the conversation going. And then we're also looking after that, we are having a senior leadership perspective on diversity and inclusion. And this is a panel with our senior leaders here on our installation to address the issues that are going on, for them to provide their stance and on how they see the issues that are affecting our community, as well as talk about diversity and how valuable that is, as well as inclusion. And so that's just one of many panels that we're going to have to allow our members across our installation to provide their input. Other things that we're having is we're going to start a storyteller program, as well as have some small group discussions. And then we're also going to have a video series, because I think at the end of the day, this isn't going away. Hold on one second. Oh, sorry about that. These are still during my duty hours. But this isn't going away, and we need to continue to have those conversations. And that's one of the things I love the most is like storytellers. I love the examples that you were given. Oh my goodness, hold on one second, let me just mute this. And so I believe that there is truly it can hit your heart when people can connect with you, because now you understand where that person is coming from. And when you're talking about storytelling, where does that start? That starts from our mind and from our hearts, and then it's expressed through our voices, which covers our emotions. And so here at Columbus, our three are part of our vision, and our mission here is we talk about creating pilots, but we also talk about cultivating and connecting. And so what other way to connect with our airmen and cultivate an environment where they can feel inclusive and valued of the team than finding ways to connect with them. And so that's why the storyteller program, as well as our small group discussions, is so crucial to keep that conversation going, as well as for them to understand that, hey, we are going to make our Air Force better, you know, and we do hear your complaints, we hear your stories, and we are going to be better as an Air Force. And then some other things that we have is we also have some training that we're pushing. We're going to bring in some great instructors and teachers like Dr. Elam. I'm not gonna lie, woo, you have me over here inspired. I could just listen to you all day. You know, I'm so thankful and blessed that Sergeant Nixon and Sergeant Taylor brought you on here. You truly are inspirational. I read your bio, and I was like, oh my goodness, I'm about to get preached today, you know. And I tell you, you have definitely changed my life, and I will say the same thing for Sergeant Bentley as we were sitting here just listening. But I'll digress and say, but yeah, so we have this 12-month plan. We are briefing our wing leadership monthly on it, and so that they can continue to know what's going forward, and we can continue to get that support from them. So when our airmen are asking, hey, what is going on at Columbus, or how are we addressing these issues, that our leadership can step down and say, hey, this is how we plan to do it, and let's do it together.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, sir. That's pretty much all of our questions that we have for today. I just want to give you guys an opportunity to throw anything else out there for the crowd if you have anything that you want to, share.
So right now, I'm actually in the process, and I thank you to Sergeant Nixon, and I forgot who else was on the line with us, but working with my local office here in AATC to try to start up an Air Force helping agency page. Because our own equal opportunity practitioners, yes, we have a page when it comes to updates, anything that's changed. Like a lot of individuals don't know that bullying and hazing has fall under the Equal Opportunity Program and not the IG office since January of this year. But those are some of the things that I'm trying to create now. So when we do have like the Air Force page, we can have the Air Force helping agency page. So it will be SARC, suicide awareness, SAPR, EO, all the helping agencies and their information and updates will be coming soon. So that is just something I would just keep an eye out for, just so we can always keep each other.
Awesome. I don't know if you got cut off on that, but I just want to thank all the participants and the leadership again for attending and being attentive. After that, I would like to turn it back over to the 5-6 Council for closing remarks.
Can you hear me?
Cool. Can you hear me, Sergeant Taylor?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Barely, you're choppy now.
Hold on, let me check my internet. Can you hear me now?
Okay, yes, I hear you. You have something else? Go ahead.
I just wanted to start by saying again, thank you, Dr. Elam, for taking the time to come out here, and provide us your message as well as the training that you provided us. I think that we all will leave better than when we started with this conversation. Again, thank you, Sergeant Taylor and Sergeant Nixon and the 5-6 Council for putting this together. Truly blessed and thankful to be a part of this. And I'll just kind of leave with just letting everyone know out there, especially across our nation, to all the recruiters, that one, the Air Force, this is a top priority for our Air Force leaders. If you haven't already seen it, there's information, there's directives, and there's guidance that is coming down, not just changing shaving waivers, but potentially changing other rules, to eliminate those systematic biases that have been put in place in our Air Force over since 1947. And so I say that to say that continue to read up on those things, because it's not always just going to fall in your lap. Sometimes you got to go out there and find it, but let you know that our leadership is definitely tackling this issue head on, and it is one of their top primary objectives. And two, just for the recruiters that are out there, as we talk about having those conversations, and you guys looking at bringing in our future leaders and those airmen that are going to be leading us now, as well as being ready to fight the fight tonight. Be vulnerable. I've read the book by Dr. Brene Brown, Dare to Lead, and it was also a life-changing book for me, which talked about vulnerability. And we talk about connecting with our airmen, and when you guys are looking at connecting with those civilians to come into our military, it starts with just being vulnerable. When you listen to them and you listen to with empathy, listen to understand, then you find out what they're going through. And that's truly how we set the tone across the Air Force to our civilians, for them to understand that the organization that I'm going to join truly is about our airmen, is about taking care of one another, and that we are all in this together. And I think that's where it starts. If we are able to be vulnerable right there at that initial station or recruiting office, and they can see that, then that's where we can truly make the difference. But you guys are the ones out there in the trenches making it happen. And I'm just blessed to be a part of this panel. And anything you guys need from me, you know where to find me. Good old Columbus Air Force Base with Sergeant Bibb.
All right. Well, thank you, sir. And thank you, Sergeant Bentley, as well. Just wanted to make sure that we give all our appreciation to all of the speakers today, and we're turning it back over to the 5-6 Council.
Copy that. Yeah. course, I'm echoing the same thing. And from the council, we're saying thank you to everyone who came as a participant, from our fellow NCOs to our upper leadership. Thank you to everyone out there who's watching live. Thank you to everyone who's gonna watch this. The whole thing we wanted to do with this whole domino of change thing is it's no different from the actual domino effect. You push one domino over and it hits another and hits another and hits another. Well, what we want to do with this is we speak to our fellow NCO, or a flight chief speaks to another flight chief, a commander speaks to another commander. And it's just to share a different perspective, to acknowledge those implicit biases. And it's not because necessarily people are racist, but it's just, hey, there's a way that I was programmed that I can't help because it happened since I was 3 years old. And I want to acknowledge that so that we can both get on the same level and focus on treating each other better and accomplishing our Air Force mission. So that's the whole purpose of this domino of change. So again, thank you for being on. And we're hoping that's what you do with this discussion. And it's going to be recorded live. So if you want to watch it again to take different points from it, so that you can go and build something within your work centers that is going to be effective, then please do that. But thank you again for being on. And it's pretty much what we have if nobody else has anything for us. And to our guest speakers, anyone on here from the 5-6, just please stay on. But other than that, concludes our call. Actually, since this is live, I guess we gotta close it out, right? So I'll reach out to you. So that concludes the session for today. So appreciate it.
Good luck with everything. Be safe.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. You too. And y'all take care.
Okay.
Nixon, we did have one person with their hand up. Were we addressing questions?
Did we had that? You know what, Mariah? That's on me. Obviously, they heard me say it. It wasn't you. Maybe we can address that after the fact, or if anybody's still on here right now. Yeah, I guess we still got some people on here, so let's do it.
Yeah. Well, Senior Master Sergeant Gilroy, I saw that you had your hand up, and I think you might have raised it in reference to like the implicit bias. So if you did have a question, feel free.
You know what? I think that may have just been a technology issue on my part. I'm old, so my apologies.
Okay.
I took some great notes, or I took some notes off of some great things I'm going to take out to my team up here in Alaska and McCord. But no, that was just my apologies.
No worries. Awesome.
Sergeant Nixon?
Yes, ma'am.
I did add 2 pieces, the glossary in the chat, and also a research study on unrealized impact for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Okay. It was about 2,000 people that they talked about organizations and what's missing, what has worked. So I added that study in the chat.
Okay. Sorry, McKay, are you able to save that at all? Because I had to log in from my other phone and I lost all of the previous chat information.
But I'll send it to you directly as well.
That works. That's perfect. That's perfect. Okay. Ma'am.
Yeah, actually, I'm sorry. I do have one real quick question. I just want to make sure I'm putting it down right. Dr. Elam, you had mentioned the Harvard implicit bias tests, and yes. So we're going to utilize that at our quarterly training as well at the end of this month. But I just want to make sure that we'll have the links. I got this down from my super at March to get onto this Facebook Live call. So when you all get those additional resources and things, how are you going to push those out to the field as a reserve recruiting flight chief? But like I said, this was sort of by happenstance that we got on this call. And I can stay on late, or I can shoot you an email, whatever works best for you all.
Yes, sir. I will and so kind of interject, because I know anything that Dr. Elam or anyone else is going to forward to it, we're definitely put that out in email. So what I'll do, sir, I'll go ahead and put my email in here. And if you don't mind taking it and sending me a message, then I can have or unless you want to post your message in here, whatever's easier. But I'll just go ahead and drop mine in there.
Okay, that's perfect. Yeah, thank you very much.
Sorry, both of those documents will also be in the comments on the live video on our page, and we'll be sharing that page or the live video as well on multiple pages. So you can have multiple ways of viewing them.
Sergeant Nixon, this is me again, Donna Elam. I was listening to, many of you have families, and that might be one of your sessions to talk about what do you do for your children. if they're experiencing anything, and to what, because I think that's important. And I have great links for children. Different links that are already vetted. You want anything for the little ones all the way to high school to be vetted, so it's age appropriate. But I was listening to some of the comments, and I think if we can start, as we want to keep everyone healthy, so your families need to be intact too, because they experience certain things that they may not tell you until after the fact. So I'll put that in the links as well.
Thank you, ma'am. Perfect.
This is Sergeant Bowles. I was wondering if I could ask a question for Dr. Elam.
Sure.
Yes, you just mentioned like educating your children, and I've been kind of holding back on the topic because I didn't really want to detract from our message today. But I am a Caucasian woman and I'm expecting, and the biggest thing, like you mentioned, I'm afraid of my child falling into the pitfalls, right? So how would you encourage educating our children from a very early age so that they don't, only see people of their same color and want to only go to that? How do we encourage them to kind of have inclusion and diversity in every subject matter?
I'm going to pull a whole slew, even though you're expecting, of books of healthy ways of looking at life, because they'll be global citizens. So there's a lot of material out now, especially with biracial children, and children, just to expose them to culture. I will make sure a link happens. Is that, who's speaking? Is that Sergeant
Bowles.
No, over at Bowles? Sergeant Bowles?
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
Okay.
Sergeant Bowles.
Okay, so Sergeant Nixon, do you have all of their information? Because I just wrote that, because that's going to be important. And feel free to even communicate with me. Because
okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, we have a number of schools that have military bases nearby. In fact, in South Carolina, where I'm doing a lot of work in Columbia, and you have military families there. And so I'm always concerned about military families because you have a lot going on. Children go through things that we're very unaware of. But biracial, multiracial, those kind of things, we have a lot of materials now. So it's keeping the children exposed, and really, because you can really break a lot of the stereotypes on what we share with children and the kind of movies and especially the storybooks. And so I'm going to definitely pull some things for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you and good luck.
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. Loving it. Does anyone else have anything else?
Yeah, we'll share that with everyone, right, Sergeant Nixon?
Yep.
I see. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. All right, I guess going once, going twice. All right, thanks again for being on. And even after we conclude this, contact the council directly if you have questions, because we are going to stay in contact with Dr. Elam. Try not to bother her too much, but absolutely, if you have any questions, just reach out to us directly, and we want to keep the discussion going in a healthy way. So
thank you so much. All of you be safe.
Yes, thank you very, very, very much again.
All right.